Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. 9:43 a.m. and we're now going to be talking with sports fanatic and producer of Friday Night Sports here at Salam Media, and that's you, Salailo Makwidiri. Very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. And you are going to give us an analysis of the Argentina versus France FIFA World Cup and a wrap-up of the Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup. A very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Auntie Julie. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to the listeners.
So how are you feeling? Undoubtedly, you must have been following all the games um, very thoroughly. From what I hear, I don't think you've missed any game. And on the Friday night show, you obviously had a great amount of input as well, because during this period, obviously, FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 featured in a very, very big way.
Yeah, definitely. I think just before the final, we can just talk about the whole World Cup itself. I think back in 2010, when we were hosting the World Cup, that was when Qatar was announced that they're going to be hosting the 2022 edition. This was after the 2014 and 2018 editions. 2014 edition being in Brazil. There was much excitement about Brazil because they're a soccer-loving nation, won the World Cup 5 times. Some of the biggest names in football come from Brazil. The exciting, bright country, more or less similar to us here in South Africa, where, we're a footballing nation. Stadiums have all been there, and there's a rich history of football in the country. And then it was announced that they're going to be hosting the 2014 edition. Brilliant. It went on successfully. There were not really much said about, the ability to host or whether or not they'll be hosting a successful edition of the World Cup. And then it was also announced in 2010, because what FIFA does is they announce the hosting rights of the countries. So in every edition, they'll announce the 3 next hosts. So in 2010, they announced the 2014 and 2018 edition. 2018 edition was hosted by Russia. I think this was before the war versus Ukraine, and Russia was in relatively good terms with the rest of the world. And their edition of the World Cup, of them hosting the World Cup, was also appreciated. But then the surprise came when FIFA announced that Qatar was going to host the World Cup. A lot of people around the world didn't know who Qatar was. They're not really known for, their love and passion for football. So that's when the little comments, started rising up whether or not they're going to host a successful World Cup. Things are, a lot was also being said about them being an Islamic country, and how a lot of what they have as laws in their country is going to contradict with what the World Cup obviously brings to any nation across the world, because you have a diversity of people all across the world, some from the most liberal to the most conservative people coming to your country. How are they going to accommodate them? With a very Islamocentric law that they have. So it has been really a difficult time, for the Qatari people, for the Qatari government, because of all the criticism that they've been getting, particularly from the West, because, a lot has been said about whether or not the World Cup is the World Cup. It belongs to the whole world, or it belongs to the Western side of the world, because of just how much ownership they feel like they have towards the World Cup. So I think, with the preparations, a lot was said about Qatar, a lot was said about how, the workers that are working the stadiums are being treated in similar fashion that a lot was said about us here in 2010. A lot was said about, the crime that we have. Are people going to be safe? Is our water safe? Because we were the first African country to host the World Cup. So I think in the same light, it was similar with Qatar, because they were the first Arab Middle Eastern country to be hosting the World Cup. Usually it bounces between Europe and South America. South Africa was the first country to host the World Cup, and they were the first. So they received a lot of criticism, a lot of backlash, sometimes with hints of Islamophobia, because we know how some of the European countries are, because, Qatar is Qatar, they have their own laws, they have their own way of doing things, and if you come into someone's house, you have to abide by those rules. And I think you have to take your cap off for Qatar for sticking by some of the laws that they have. Number one being the sale of alcohol. Saying this was actually the first edition of the World Cup where you had a major sponsor of the World Cup being an alcoholic brand, but alcohol was not sold at the event. So that was one of the highlights of this World Cup. But it's their country at the end of the day. It's their laws, and that's how they're going to do things. And the whole world was coming into their house. So they start
Okay.
by their guns. And I think an overview of it and how we've looked at it with Rakia, the host of the Friday night show. It was a really, really good World Cup. I think
What,
some of it,
Solana,
yeah,
what sort of a sense are you getting? I must upfront that I'm not a sports fanatic at all. I don't really follow any sporting code, but I was also kind of taken up. I was taken up with this wave of soccer fever, the enthusiasm, and just with everybody else, I just got carried away in that spirit of soccer craziness. I must also say that two of the teams that I had backed, firstly, it was Morocco, and then, of course, when they were out of the finals, semi-finals, and finals, I then put my money on France. So I was bitterly disappointed that France didn't win. And I don't know much about the sport, but as I was watching, the question I put to my husband is I felt that they played a good game. And for them to have lost out by penalties, to me, didn't seem fair. Do you think it's time that FIFA re-looked the rules of the game regarding who played the better game, who was the stronger team on the field, and then by some means try and work out how you do the penalty, introduce the penalty feature towards the end of the game to get the clear winner. That didn't sit well with me. Am I making sense to you with that comment of
no,
mine?
no, you are. I think football is called a beautiful game for that specific reason. It's a beautiful game. One commentator who commentates and so always says it was for common night. It's painful, but it also feels good. And
Right,
it's for exactly that reason where you'd have a team that plays really, really well, but they might end up not winning the game. So
right.
penalties are just a way of saying, okay, you guys have went on it for the full 90 minutes. We gave you an extra 15 minutes per quarter, which makes 30 minutes, so a total of 115 minutes to go at each other, but there was no way of separating you. So penalties are just a roll of a dice to see who's going to win the game. Yes, it's unfair, considering how France really played. I mean, if you watch that game, Kylian Mbappe was just out of this world.
Mm,
Young 23-year-old rising star carried the whole French team on his shoulders,
absolutely.
and and,
Absolutely.
and yeah, and broke a record. I think a 66 year
Yes,
old record of a person scoring 3 goals in
yeah,
one World Cup match. Never
absolutely.
mind the final, and
Mm.
and, and and he did it, but they didn't win.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so let's look at the issue around the entire, we don't have very much time left, but I will hand over to you. Your thoughts, being such a sport fanatic yourself and producing the Friday night sports show here at Salam Media, whom do you believe were the true winners? Let's forget about the who scored the most goals, etc. Whom do you believe from the start of the World Cup Qatar 2022, who do you believe stood out in your mind as being the true winners of Qatar 2022?
I
Who
think for me,
played the best soccer, who entertained us like we've never been entertained before?
I think for me it has to be Morocco. I think for the first time in the history of the World Cup, the hearts and minds and souls of African and Arab people across the world were fixed on this prize. For the first time, we thought we could win it. With Morocco being the first country to bow out in the semifinals of the World Cup. That was something never seen before. The furthest that any African country has ever got was the quarterfinals with Cameroon, with Roger Mel. I think it was in 1996. So I think it just said a lot about where Africa and the Arab Middle Eastern countries are right now. We are the people on the up, and we are people that are slowly raising our hands to be counted amongst the best. So it was more than just football for me when Morocco made it that far in the World Cup, considering, the geopolitical issues that are happening across the world, how our part of the world was always viewed. So it was a beautiful thing to see for me. And also, I think, for the fact that Lionel Messi won the World Cup, I think he's been a good servant of the game. He's going to 20 years now playing, always lived under the shadow of Diego Maradona as, the greatest of all time, as young people call it, the GOAT, who has never won the World Cup. Maradona has won it. He's been living under his shadow for such a long
Mm,
time. And people are saying, are you really the greatest of all time if you've never won the World Cup? And, he's done it. It feels like a
mm,
fairy tale finish for Messi, from where he started his career. Young boy
mm.
from a relatively poor family in Argentina, had growing deficiencies. He wasn't growing at a pace that, the young boy's age would. Even now, if you can check his stage, he's still very small, he's short. But the talent that he has, and him, going to the world stage, winning every major football honor at the years to the world, but always missing that elusive World Cup. And finally, in the golden years of his career, where this is literally his last dance, they call it, his last World
Wow.
Cup, he
Wow.
finally wins it. So I think that's
Okay.
one that stand out for
All
me.
right. Two other very quick questions. Is it overs now as far as Ronaldo is concerned? Is he now done with professional football, or is he still going to feature? He didn't seem to get a very good deal.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, all the football politics that were playing out before the World Cup, if that had an
Mm.
impact on his mindset.
I think sadly, yes. I think, he's a very proud person. He's a winner. He loves, winning everything. He's very competitive, goes for all the records. But I think, it's time for him to admit that it's done now. I mean, he's 37 years old. In footballing terms, you're really old. Another World Cup is in the next 4 years. I don't see him, playing in it because he's not getting any deals from any of the big teams. He likes playing
Right.
the bigger leagues in England, in France, in Italy, in Germany. That's where, if you want to play at the highest level of world football, that's the league you should be playing. No team wants him after, obviously, the politics that happened with him in Manchester United and them, releasing him. So
Yeah.
the deal that he got was to play for a Saudi-based team. The money is good, but competitive-wise, I don't think the league is at that level where a player will play, then automatically will play for a Portuguese national team that is some of the best players in the world. I mean, you saw in
Right.
the stages of the World Cup, he was not even featuring. The
Mm,
coach started him on the
mm.
bench. Younger players
Yeah.
would come in before him, and that would make a difference. So sometimes it even felt like he was slowing down the team itself, because he's a bit
Right.
older. They want to
Right.
play around him, but
Yeah. It was actually
the
sad
final
to
one,
watch.
yeah,
It
it
was
was.
sad to watch. Let me very quickly put my final question in here. Who are the young, rising, upcoming stars that we need to be looking out for now, going forward, as far as world soccer is concerned? Top league soccer. Who are the rising stars?
Definitely, I think looking at first the French team that played yesterday. I think everyone is now saying, with Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi potentially going to hang up their boots, but I think Messi kicked him out with a statement just this morning saying he's not retiring. He's still going to play, but I think he's not going to make it to the next World Cup. United
Right.
States, Canada, and Mexico. There's going to be a triple joint World Cup that they're going to be hosting in 2026. I don't think any of these players, Ronaldo or Messi, are going to be there, but Kylian Mbappe is going to be there. 23-year-old, already has a World Cup under his belt, walked away with a golden boot, top goal scorer of the
Wow.
World Cup, 9 goals.
Wow.
He's
Absolutely.
only 23. So, we're just talking with my colleagues when we're watching the game. I don't mind Kylian Mbappe losing this World Cup. He potentially has another 3 or 4 that he's going to win,
Absolutely.
considering how brilliant he is and how young he is.
Yeah.
Looking at the French team again. He has a
And
young
did you
player called,
see, Salalo,
yeah,
did you see his facial expression and his body language? You
yeah.
see how determined he was. He was out there to play the game of his life.
You would say it was his last World Cup, but he still has 3, 4 more to play.
Yes, absolutely.
That says a lot about him, and he's mental to want to win, and that's the same spirit we saw from Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi while they were younger. That hunger
Yeah,
to say, even if the whole
absolutely.
team's not doing well, I'm going to carry my nation on my shoulders, and we're going to make something out of it. I mean, the goals that he scored sometimes came out of nowhere. In the dying minutes of the
Right.
game, everyone thought Argentina had it. So for me,
Yeah.
definitely a player to look out for. And I think that the Brazilian team, the young guy called Rodrigo, very brilliant, plays for Real Madrid. Nice player to watch. There's another player from Real Madrid, plays for the French team. He's called Camavinga, also brilliant to watch. But I think for me, it's the African teams. Next edition of the World Cup, we're going to have, I think, 6, 7, or 8 African teams that are going to be representing our continent. So usually you'd have 5 countries, but because Morocco reached the semi-finals of the tournament, FIFA is going to let more African teams participate. So I think there might be a
Okay,
chance that we might see an African country potentially
all right.
winning a World Cup in our lifetime.
So, Lilo, that's where we have to leave it. We've run out of time. Lovely talking with you. And yeah, I'll see you around when you get back after your stint at Nasrec. I'll see you in the office
Yeah.
sometime soon. You take care. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Assalamu alaikum to Julie.
It is 9:59 exactly. Standing by to talk to us is another superstar, and that, of course, is Anissa Mazimpaka. And she's going to give us a rundown of the ANC National Conference over the last 3 days.